Why Financial Freedom is Closer Than You Think. Introduction. This book has one job: to show you that financial freedom is not as far away as you've been told. Not through theory, not through vague inspiration, but through 10 chapters, each built around one simple idea, one real story, and 3 specific actions you can take immediately to move your financial life forward. No complicated financial jargon. No assumption that you're already wealthy, already disciplined, or already have it figured out. Just a clear, honest roadmap designed for real people living real lives with real financial challenges. By the end of this book, you will know exactly where you stand, exactly what's been holding you back, and exactly what to do next. Each chapter ends with 3 actions. Those actions are your bridge between listening and living. Don't just hear them, use them. Because information without action is just entertainment. And this book was not built to entertain you. It was built to change your financial life. Let's begin. Why financial freedom is closer than you think. Chapter 1. The freedom you've been misdefined. There's a version of financial freedom that lives in the imagination of almost every working adult, and it usually looks the same. A beachfront somewhere warm. No alarm clock. A bank account with so many zeros that the word budget has become a relic of some distant, harder life. It looks like a magazine cover. It looks like the life of someone else. And that's exactly the problem. Because if financial freedom is something that only belongs to someone else, to the person who got lucky with a startup, or inherited the right last name, or happened to buy Bitcoin in 2012, then by definition, it can never belong to you. You've already disqualified yourself before you've taken a single step. This book is about dismantling that story, not with empty motivation or abstract promise, but with specific, practical evidence that financial freedom, a real, meaningful version of it, is almost certainly closer to you than you've been told. But first, we need to agree on what we're actually talking about. The lottery ticket mentality. Ask 10 people what financial freedom means, and most of them will describe a destination that requires either extraordinary luck or extraordinary income. $1 million. 5 million. Enough to never work again. They've absorbed a definition from culture, from television, from social media, from the quiet competitiveness of keeping up that makes freedom synonymous with excess. This is what we might call the lottery ticket mentality. The belief that financial freedom is a single, enormous event that either happens to you or it doesn't. You either win or you don't. You either make it or you spend your life watching other people who did. The problem with this mentality isn't just that it's discouraging. It's that it's functionally wrong. It causes real, measurable harm. When people believe that freedom requires a jackpot, they stop taking the small, consistent actions that actually build freedom. Why invest $200 a month if that's never going to get you to $1 million? Why cut back on subscriptions when the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems impossibly wide? The lottery ticket mentality is the single biggest reason people stay stuck. Not lack of income, not lack of intelligence, not bad luck. The belief itself is the trap. Meet Marcus. Marcus was a high school history teacher in Ohio. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, owned a modest 3-bedroom home, and spent his summers reading and coaching his daughter's soccer team. He did not come from money. He did not receive an inheritance. He never earned more than $67,000 a year. He retired at 48, not to a beach in the Maldives, to a life where he woke up without an alarm and chose, every single day, what to do with his time. He consulted part-time when he felt like it. He traveled domestically, budget-consciously, 2 or 3 times a year. He was not rich by the conventional definition, but he was free, completely, genuinely, structurally free. How? He had spent 20 years operating on a quietly radical idea that financial freedom wasn't a number, it was a ratio. Specifically, the ratio between what he needed to live and what his money could generate without him actively working. When those 2 numbers crossed, when his passive income and investment withdrawals could cover his actual lifestyle, he was free. It didn't require millions. It required math, patience, and a very clear-eyed understanding of what he actually needed to be happy. Marcus's story isn't exceptional. It's replicable, and versions of it are playing out in ordinary households, with ordinary incomes, in cities and towns that don't appear in financial success stories. The difference between Marcus and most people wasn't talent. It was definition, redefining financial freedom. Here is the definition this book will work from, and it's worth writing down somewhere you'll see it again. Financial freedom is having enough from your assets, your systems, and your choices to cover the life you actually want to live without depending entirely on a single paycheck to do it. Notice what's missing from that definition. There's no mention of a specific dollar amount, no reference to luxury, no requirement that you stop working entirely, only that you stop having to work entirely. The distinction is enormous. Under this definition, financial freedom exists on a spectrum. You don't wake up one morning bankrupt and go to sleep that night completely free. You move along a continuum, crossing thresholds that each give you more options, more breathing room, more choices. Some of those thresholds are closer than you think. In fact, some of you reading this, or listening to it, are already closer to one of those thresholds than you've realized. You've just been measuring yourself against the wrong finish line. Options are the currency of freedom. Another way to think about financial freedom is this. It's the accumulation of options. Every financial decision you make either expands or contracts your future options. Debt contracts them. Savings expand them. A diversified income expands them further. A clear understanding of what you actually need to live well, as opposed to what culture tells you that you should want, expands them dramatically. When Marcus looked at his life, he wasn't measuring himself against a neighbor's boat or a colleague's kitchen renovation. He was measuring himself against his own clearly defined needs. And because he had done that work honestly, he discovered that his options were far greater than he had assumed. This is the shift this entire book is asking you to make. Not a sacrifice, not a deprivation, a recalibration from someone else's definition of freedom to your own. Your freedom number. One of the most clarifying exercises in personal finance is calculating what's called your freedom number. This is not the number in your savings account. It's the monthly amount you genuinely need, not want, not aspire to, need, to live your desired life comfortably. Most people have never sat down and calculated this number with any precision. They have a vague sense that they need more, but they've never interrogated what more actually means. When you calculate it honestly, two things usually happen. First, the number is almost always lower than people expected. Second, knowing the number makes the goal suddenly feel reachable. If your freedom number is $3,500 a month and you're currently generating $800 a month from a combination of savings interest, a small investment portfolio, and occasional freelance work, you're not at zero. You're nearly a quarter of the way there. That's a very different psychological starting point than, I have nothing and I need everything. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Every chapter in this book ends with 3 specific actions, not suggestions, not things to think about. Actions, small enough to do this week, meaningful enough to matter over time. Action 1. Audit your definition of freedom. Write down, in your own words, what financial freedom means to you. Not what you've absorbed from culture, what you actually want. Where do you want to live? How do you want to spend your time? What do you actually need to feel secure? This takes 20 minutes and it changes everything. Action 2. Calculate your freedom number. Add up the monthly expenses that would cover your desired life. Housing, food, transportation, health, leisure, and a small buffer. That's your number. Write it down. It's the most important number in this book. Action 3. Calculate your current freedom score. Divide your current monthly passive or semi-passive income, savings interest, investment returns, any income that doesn't require you trading hours for dollars, by your freedom number and multiply by 100. The result is your freedom score, a percentage that tells you exactly where you are on the spectrum. Even if the number is 3%, you now have a baseline. And baselines are where progress begins. Financial freedom is not a lottery. It's not reserved for the lucky or the brilliant or the already wealthy. It is, at its core, a series of decisions made consistently over time by someone who knows what they're aiming for. Marcus knew, and now, so do you. In the next chapter, we're going to follow the money, specifically, the money most people don't realize they're losing every single month. Because before you can build freedom, you need to stop the leaks. Chapter 2. The invisible drain, where your money actually goes. Let's start with a number, $800. That's not a mortgage payment. It's not a car loan. It's not a medical bill or a student loan or any of the big, obvious financial obligations that keep people up at night. $800 is the amount that Sarah, a 34-year-old graphic designer living in Denver, discovered she was losing every single month to expenses she had completely forgotten existed. Not spending consciously, not choosing, with full awareness, to allocate money toward things she valued. Losing, quietly, automatically, invisibly, the way air leaks from a tire that looks perfectly fine until the morning you can't drive to work. Sarah wasn't reckless. She wasn't irresponsible. She made $58,000 a year, paid her bills on time, and thought of herself as someone who was pretty good with money. She just had never looked carefully enough to see where it was actually going. When she finally did, it changed her financial life completely. The visibility problem. Here is one of the most important truths in personal finance, and it doesn't get nearly enough attention. Most people don't have an income problem. They have a visibility problem. The conversation around money almost always centers on earning more. Get a raise. Find a side hustle. Negotiate your salary. And while increasing income absolutely matters, we'll get to that in a later chapter, it is almost useless if you don't first understand where your current income is actually going. Think of it this way. Pouring more water into a bucket with holes in the bottom doesn't solve anything. You end up exactly where you started, just more exhausted from carrying the water. The holes have to come first. The visibility problem is the holes. And the reason most people never find them is a combination of three things: automation, normalization, and the slow creep of a lifestyle that expands quietly, without announcement, to absorb whatever income comes in. The psychology of lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep is one of the most misunderstood forces in personal finance. Most people think of it as something dramatic, a sudden upgrade in housing, a new luxury car, a complete wardrobe overhaul. But the most dangerous version of lifestyle creep isn't dramatic at all. It's incremental. It happens in small, individually justifiable steps that seem completely reasonable in the moment. You get a raise, so you upgrade your streaming package. A year later, you add a meal kit delivery service because it saves time. Then a premium gym membership because you deserve it. Then a storage unit because the apartment feels crowded. Crowded, by the way, with things you bought with that original raise. Each individual decision is defensible. Together, they silently consume the exact financial progress you thought you were making. By the time most people notice lifestyle creep, they've been earning more for 3 or 4 years and have somehow saved less than they did when they were making less money. That's not a coincidence. That's the mechanics of the creep. The deeper psychological layer here is what behavioral economists call hedonic adaptation. Our remarkable human capacity to adjust to improvements in our circumstances and return to roughly the same level of satisfaction we had before. The new apartment that felt like a luxury in month 1 feels like the baseline by month 6. And a new baseline always needs to be exceeded. Understanding this isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. You can't fix what you can't see. Visible versus invisible spending. Let's draw a clear distinction between two types of expenses, because confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes people make. Visible spending is the category most people think of when they think about their budget. Rent, groceries, utilities, car payment. These are the expenses that require active engagement. You sign a lease, you stand at a register, you write a check. You may not enjoy them, but you know they're there. Invisible spending is everything else, and it is far larger than most people realize. Invisible spending includes subscriptions you signed up for and forgot, the fitness app you downloaded during a January resolution, the software trial that converted to paid, the news site you subscribed to for one article. It includes the auto-renewing insurance add-ons you agreed to in a moment of checkbox fatigue. It includes the bank fees that quietly appear each month, the free trial that ended 6 months ago, the annual membership that renewed while you were busy. Beyond subscriptions, invisible spending includes the behavioral costs, the daily coffee that doesn't feel like a financial decision because it's become a ritual, the convenience delivery fees that appear so often they've stopped registering, the upsells and bundles and loyalty program traps that extract money so smoothly you never feel the withdrawal. None of these are catastrophic individually. Together, they are often the difference between financial progress and financial stagnation. What Sarah actually found. When Sarah sat down and did a genuine, line-by-line audit of her last 3 months of bank and credit card statements, something she had never done with that level of detail, here's a portion of what she found. A meditation app she'd subscribed to 2 years earlier, $12.99 a month. A cloud storage plan she'd upgraded and then forgotten, $9.99. A gym membership at a location she moved away from, $35. Two streaming services she'd kept just in case, while using only one, $28 combined. A monthly subscription box she'd meant to cancel after the first delivery, $45. Bank overdraft protection on an account that hadn't gone near zero in years, $8.95 a month. A roadside assistance plan she already had through her car insurance, $15. That's roughly $155 a month in expenses she had completely forgotten about. Nearly $1,860 a year spent on things that were providing her with zero ongoing value. But that was just the forgotten subscriptions. When she dug deeper into behavioral spending, delivery fees, convenience upgrades, impulsive online purchases she genuinely couldn't remember making, the number climbed above $800 a month. $800. Redirected into an investment account at a modest 7% annual return over 20 years becomes more than $500,000. That's not hypothetical. That's arithmetic. And it starts with seeing what's already happening. The three-bucket system. Once you've done a genuine spending audit, the next move is to organize what you find. The simplest and most effective framework is what we'll call the three-bucket system. Bucket 1 is needs, the non-negotiable expenses required to maintain your basic life and livelihood. Housing, food, transportation, utilities, healthcare. These are not up for elimination. They're up for optimization. Bucket 2 is values, the spending that genuinely reflects what you care about and contributes meaningfully to your quality of life. This looks different for everyone. For one person, it's travel. For another, it's cooking equipment, or live music, or the kids' activities. These expenses deserve to stay. They're not the problem. Bucket 3 is noise, the spending that is neither necessary nor genuinely fulfilling. Forgotten subscriptions, convenience fees paid out of habit, impulse purchases that didn't deliver lasting satisfaction, duplicate services. This is the bucket that, when cleared out, often produces a surprising amount of monthly cash flow. Most people, when they first do this exercise, discover that their noise bucket is significantly larger than they assumed. And the beautiful thing about noise spending is that eliminating it requires no sacrifice, because by definition, you weren't getting anything meaningful from it. The 30-day money audit. The most powerful financial exercise in this entire book might be the simplest: a genuine, honest, retrospective look at where your money has gone. Not a projection, not a plan. A backward-looking audit of the last 30 days. Every transaction, across every account, pulled from your bank statements and credit card records and organized into the three buckets. Most people resist this exercise because they're afraid of what they'll find. That fear is information. If you're anxious about looking, it means you already suspect there's something important to see. And as uncomfortable as seeing it might be, not seeing it is costing you far more. The audit doesn't require special software or financial expertise. It requires an hour, a spreadsheet, or even a pen and paper, and a commitment to honesty. What you find will almost certainly surprise you. And those surprises are the beginning of your financial freedom, not in some abstract, motivational sense, but in the very literal sense that the money you find is money you can redirect. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Do the 30-day money audit. Pull your bank and credit card statements from the last 30 days and go through every single transaction. Don't judge, just categorize. Write down every expense in one of 3 columns: needs, values, or noise. Set aside 60 minutes this week and do it completely. Action 2. Identify your top 3 invisible leaks. From your noise bucket, highlight the 3 expenses that surprised you most, the ones you had either forgotten about or that clearly weren't adding value to your life. Calculate what those 3 expenses cost you annually. Then calculate what that annual amount would become over 20 years if invested at 7%. Let the number speak for itself. Action 3. Cancel, pause, or renegotiate one thing today. Not next week. Today. Find one subscription, fee, or recurring charge in your noise bucket and eliminate it before you put this book down. One action, taken immediately, does more for your financial future than any amount of planning that never becomes doing. Sarah redirected her $800 a month into a combination of debt payoff and a low-cost investment account. Within 18 months, she had eliminated her credit card debt entirely. Within 4 years, she had a fully funded emergency account and a growing investment portfolio she'd never imagined possible on her salary. Nothing about her income changed. Everything about her visibility did. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about debt, the obstacle that feels like a wall but is actually a door if you know where the handle is. Chapter 3. The Debt Trap and How to Escape It Faster Than You Think. Here is something the financial industry would prefer you didn't think about too carefully. Minimum payments are not designed to help you get out of debt. They are designed to keep you in it. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's a business model. When a credit card company sets your minimum payment at 2% of your outstanding balance, they have calculated, with remarkable precision, exactly how long it will take you to pay off that balance if you comply. And the answer, on a typical $8,000 credit card balance at 22% interest, is somewhere between 25 and 30 years, with total interest payments that can exceed the original balance 2 or 3 times over. You didn't borrow money for 30 years. You borrowed it for a vacation, or an emergency, or a period of life that got away from you. But the structure of minimum payments turns a short-term problem into a decades-long sentence, unless you understand how the math works and decide, deliberately, to work against it. That's what this chapter is about. Not shame. Not lectures about lattes and avocado toast. The mechanics of debt, the psychology of debt, and the precise, practical steps that allow ordinary people to escape it far faster than the credit card companies want them to believe is possible. The true cost of debt. Before we talk about solutions, let's make the problem concrete, because most people carry debt the way they carry background noise. It's there, it's uncomfortable, but its full weight is never fully felt until you actually measure it. Let's take James. James was 29 years old, working as a project coordinator in Atlanta, earning $52,000 a year. He had accumulated $34,000 in debt across 4 accounts, 2 credit cards totaling $18,000 at an average interest rate of 21%, a personal loan of $9,000 at 14%, and a medical bill payment plan of $7,000 at 0% interest. On paper, James was making his payments. Nothing was in collections. His credit score was mediocre but functional. To the outside world, and frankly to James himself, most of the time, the situation felt manageable. But when James actually sat down and calculated what his debt was costing him monthly in interest alone, the number was $347. Not principal repayment, just interest. Money that vanished every single month and built nothing, not equity, not investment returns, not savings. Just the cost of having borrowed. Over a year, that was $4,164, nearly 8% of his gross income, going directly to lenders for the privilege of continuing to owe them money. When James saw that number clearly, something shifted. Not panic, clarity. And clarity is where solutions begin. 2 methods, 1 goal. There are 2 well-established strategies for paying off multiple debts, and both work. The question is which one works best for you? And the answer depends as much on psychology as it does on mathematics. The first is the avalanche method. This approach directs all extra payment capacity toward the debt with the highest interest rate first, while maintaining minimum payments on everything else. Once the highest rate debt is eliminated, you roll that payment into attacking the next highest, and so on. Mathematically, this is the optimal approach. It minimizes the total interest you pay and gets you out of debt faster in pure dollar terms. The second is the snowball method, popularized by financial educator Dave Ramsey. This approach ignores interest rates entirely and focuses on paying off the smallest balance first. The logic is psychological. Eliminating a debt completely, regardless of its size, creates a sense of momentum and accomplishment that keeps people motivated through what is often a long, difficult process. Here's what the research actually shows. The snowball method results in slightly higher total interest paid, but significantly higher completion rates. People who use it are more likely to finish the process. And a slightly suboptimal plan you complete is infinitely better than a mathematically perfect plan you abandon halfway through. James chose the avalanche method because he was analytically motivated. Watching the interest numbers drop kept him engaged. Someone else in his exact situation might have been better served by the snowball. Neither answer is universally correct. The right method is the one you'll actually stick with. The debt acceleration dollar. This is the concept that made the biggest difference for James, and it's simpler than it sounds. The debt acceleration dollar is the single additional dollar, or more realistically, the small pool of additional dollars you find each month and direct entirely toward debt payoff beyond your minimum payments. It doesn't have to be large. Even an extra $100 a month, applied consistently to your highest interest debt, can cut years off your payoff timeline and save thousands in interest. James found his acceleration dollars in three places. First, from his spending audit. He identified $180 a month in expenses he was able to eliminate without meaningful impact on his quality of life. Second, he picked up occasional freelance work through an online platform, averaging about $200 extra per month. Third, he redirected his annual tax refund, which averaged $1,100, entirely toward debt rather than treating it as a spending windfall. Combined, James was putting an additional $580 to $700 per month toward his highest interest debt on top of his minimum payments. The result was striking. His $18,000 in credit card debt, which would have taken over 20 years to eliminate on minimum payments, was gone in 19 months. His personal loan followed 8 months later. His total debt elimination timeline, 26 months. 26 months to escape $34,000 in debt on a $52,000 salary. Not because James had exceptional income or exceptional discipline, because he had a clear map, a chosen method, and a consistent acceleration dollar. The psychological weight of debt. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge something that financial books often overlook. Debt is not just a mathematical problem. It is a psychological one. Research in behavioral economics consistently shows that carrying debt affects cognitive function, decision-making quality, and emotional well-being in measurable ways. The persistent low-grade stress of owing money, the background hum of financial obligation, consumes mental bandwidth that could otherwise be directed toward earning, creating, and living. There's also a phenomenon called debt paralysis, where the size or complexity of a debt feels so overwhelming that people disengage entirely. They stop opening statements. They avoid thinking about it. They develop a kind of learned helplessness around the problem because engaging with it feels worse than ignoring it. If this describes you, the most important thing to understand is this. The discomfort of looking directly at your debt is temporary. The cost of not looking is permanent. Every month of avoidance is another month of interest compounding, another month of options contracting, another month of the problem growing quietly while you look away. The moment you build your debt map, the simple, complete, organized picture of exactly what you owe and to whom, the psychological weight almost always decreases. The known, however uncomfortable, is always more manageable than the feared unknown. Debt and the freedom timeline. Here's the connection that motivates people more than any budgeting tip. Every dollar you eliminate in high-interest debt is a dollar that can begin working for you instead of against you. When James made his final debt payment, he didn't celebrate by spending the money he'd been directing at creditors. He redirected it, the full $580 monthly acceleration amount, into an investment account. He had been trained, over 26 months, to live without that money. Redirecting it required no new discipline. It was already a habit. The only thing that changed was the destination. This is the hidden gift inside a disciplined debt payoff. You graduate with a forced savings habit already in place. The money that was feeding the debt machine is now available to build your future. That transition, from debt payments to investment contributions, is one of the most powerful financial pivots a person can make. James, now 32 and debt-free, is investing roughly $700 a month. At a modest 7% annual return, by the time he's 52, he will have approximately $370,000 in investment assets, built almost entirely from money he used to send to credit card companies. The debt wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of it. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Build your debt map. On a single page, list every debt you carry. For each one, write down the creditor name, the current balance, the interest rate, and the minimum monthly payment. Total it all. This is your map. It may be uncomfortable to see it assembled in one place. Do it anyway. Clarity is the first tool. Action 2. Choose your payoff method. Based on what you know about your own psychology, decide right now whether you're an avalanche person or a snowball person. Are you motivated by math and efficiency? Avalanche. Do you need visible wins to stay motivated? Snowball. Write your chosen method at the top of your debt map and circle the first debt you're going to attack. Action 3. Find your debt acceleration dollar. Look at your spending audit from Chapter 2 and identify a specific, recurring amount you can redirect to debt payoff every month, even if it's $50. Then write down one additional source where you might find more, a skill you could monetize occasionally, a recurring expense you could reduce, a refund or reimbursement you've been meaning to pursue. Name the dollar. Give it a job. That single act of intention is worth more than any financial plan that stays abstract. James paid off his last debt on a Tuesday afternoon in February. He remembers it clearly, not because of a dramatic celebration, but because of what he felt in the days that followed. A lightness he hadn't realized he was missing. A sense that his paycheck, for the first time in years, was fully his. That feeling is available to you, and it is closer than you think. In the next chapter, we're going to challenge something that well-meaning people have told you your entire life, that saving money is the path to financial security. It's not wrong exactly, but it is dangerously incomplete. And the gap between saving and true freedom is where most people's financial journeys quietly stall. Chapter 4. The Saving Myth. Why saving alone will never make you free. Picture this. You've done everything right. You cut the subscriptions. You paid down the debt. You opened a savings account, and you've been feeding it faithfully every month for years. Your balance is growing. You feel responsible, virtuous, even, like someone who has finally figured out the discipline that most people lack. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, you realize something is wrong. Despite years of saving, despite the growing number in your account, the distance between where you are and where you want to be doesn't seem to be shrinking the way it should. The finish line keeps moving. The math doesn't add up the way you expected. This is not a failure of discipline. This is a failure of strategy. And it happens to millions of careful, responsible, hardworking people every single year, because they were taught that saving money is the path to financial security. Nobody told them about the silent force working against every dollar they set aside. That force has a name. It's called inflation. And understanding it will permanently change how you think about money sitting still. The silent thief. Inflation is the gradual increase in the price of goods and services over time, which is another way of saying the gradual decrease in what your money can actually buy. At an average annual inflation rate of 3%, something that costs $100 today will cost approximately $134 in 10 years and $181 in 20. Your savings account, meanwhile, is likely earning somewhere between 0.5% and 5% interest depending on the account type and current economic conditions. In many standard savings accounts, the rate sits well below inflation, which means that in real terms, in terms of actual purchasing power, your money is losing value while it sits there, even as the number on the screen gets larger. This is the illusion of saving. The balance grows, but the freedom it represents shrinks. You feel like you're moving forward. The economic reality is that you're standing still at best and moving backward at worst. This isn't an argument against saving. Saving is essential. It provides the emergency cushion that keeps a financial life from being derailed by the unexpected, and it's the foundation everything else is built on. But saving is a defensive tool. It protects what you have. It does not, on its own, build what you need. To build genuine financial freedom, your money has to work, not rest. Work. The story of two sisters. Elena and Rosa grew up in the same household, with the same financial education, which is to say, almost none. Their parents kept cash in a savings account and considered that responsible money management. Both sisters entered adulthood with similar incomes, similar expenses, and similar starting points. At 25, both of them had managed to put together $5,000. That's where their paths diverged. Elena did what felt safe and sensible. She put her $5,000 into a high-yield savings account earning around 2% annually and continued adding $300 every month. She never touched it. She was proud of her discipline, and rightly so. Rosa made a different choice. She read a book, not unlike this one, and put her $5,000 into a low-cost index fund tracking the broad stock market. She set up an automatic contribution of $300 per month into the same account, and, more importantly, left it alone. By age 60, after 35 years of identical monthly contributions, here is what each sister had. Elena's savings account, growing at an average of 2% annually, had grown to approximately $193,000. Rose's investment account, growing at the stock market's historical average of roughly 7% annually, had grown to approximately $567,000. Same discipline, same monthly contributions, same starting amount, a difference of $374,000, produced entirely by where the money was placed, not how much of it there was. Elena didn't do anything wrong. She just didn't know there was a better option. That's the gap this chapter is designed to close. Why people stay in savings accounts. If investing produces dramatically better long-term outcomes, why do so many people keep their money in savings accounts for years or their entire lives? 3 reasons, primarily. The first is familiarity. Savings accounts are what most people grew up watching their parents use. They're simple to understand, universally available, and carry the psychological comfort of something known and trusted. Investing, by contrast, is associated with complexity, jargon, and the vague threat of loss. The unfamiliar always feels riskier than the familiar, even when the data says otherwise. The second is the fear of loss. Investment accounts fluctuate. The balance goes up and it goes down, sometimes dramatically over short periods. Watching a balance drop, even temporarily, triggers a loss aversion response that's deeply wired into human psychology. We feel losses roughly twice as intensely as we feel equivalent gains. Savings accounts never show a negative return, which makes them feel safer even when they're slowly losing ground to inflation. The third reason is a belief, often unexamined, that investing is for wealthy people, that you need a large sum to get started, or professional expertise, or access to some world that isn't open to ordinary earners. None of this is true, but we'll spend the entire next chapter dismantling it. For now, the important thing is simply to recognize the gap between what saving can do for your future and what investing can do. That gap is where financial freedom either gets built or gets lost. The inflation loss calculator. Here is a practical way to feel the reality of inflation rather than just understand it abstractly. Take whatever amount you currently have in a standard savings account earning less than the inflation rate. Let's say it's $15,000, earning 1.5% in a regular savings account, while inflation runs at 3%. Your real annual return is negative 1.5%. Every year, your $15,000 loses approximately $225 in purchasing power, silently, invisibly, without any transaction taking place. Over 10 years, the real value of that $15,000, despite the growing nominal balance, will have eroded by roughly $2,500 in today's dollars. That's not a crisis, but it's not nothing either. And when you scale it up, when you imagine a retirement savings strategy built entirely on low-yield savings accounts over a 30-year career, the compounded loss of purchasing power becomes genuinely significant. The antidote is not complicated. It is simply to ensure that the majority of your long-term savings, money you don't need immediate access to, is placed somewhere with returns that outpace inflation. For most people, that means investing. And as the next chapter will show, investing does not require expertise, large sums, or constant attention. It requires a decision and a starting point. That's all. The bridge between saving and freedom. Think of saving and investing not as alternatives, but as stages. Saving is stage 1. It builds the foundation, creates the emergency fund, and provides the stability that makes everything else possible. You need roughly 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a liquid, accessible savings account before you should be directing significant money toward investments. That cushion is non-negotiable. It's what prevents a job loss or a medical bill from unraveling everything you've built. But once that foundation exists, every additional dollar you park in a low-yield savings account, beyond what you need for short-term goals and emergencies, is a dollar that is quietly underperforming. It is a dollar that could be crossing the bridge from saving into investing, from protection into growth, from standing still into moving forward. Most people never cross that bridge because nobody clearly showed them where it was. This chapter is the map. The next chapter is the crossing. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Calculate your inflation loss. Look at the current balance in your savings account and find the interest rate it's earning. Then look up the current inflation rate. Subtract your savings rate from the inflation rate. Multiply that percentage by your balance. That number, likely a positive figure, is what your money is losing in real purchasing power every single year. Write it down. Let it make you appropriately uncomfortable. Action 2. Open or identify an investment account this week. Not next month. This week. Whether it's a workplace retirement account you haven't fully enrolled in, a Roth IRA you've been meaning to open, or a basic brokerage account, identify the specific account and take the first step toward funding it. The action doesn't have to be large. It has to happen. Action 3. Automate a monthly transfer. Decide on an amount, even $50, even $25, that will move automatically from your checking account into your investment vehicle every month on a fixed date. Automation removes the decision from the equation. You won't talk yourself out of it, forget about it, or redirect it towards something else. It moves before you have a chance to intervene. Small and automatic beats large and occasional every single time. Saving is not the enemy. Complacency is. The belief that responsible behavior today is sufficient for freedom tomorrow, without understanding the forces working against a static pile of money, is what keeps millions of careful, disciplined people from ever reaching the finish line they deserve. Elena eventually learned what her sister knew. At 45, she shifted her strategy, moved her savings into investments, and spent the next 15 years making up ground. She didn't reach Rosa's number, but she got close enough to matter. It's never too late to cross the bridge, but the sooner you cross it, the more the crossing is worth. In the next chapter, we're going to address the single biggest myth that keeps people from investing: the belief that you need to be an expert to do it. You don't, and the proof is simpler than you'd ever expect. Chapter 5. Investing without being an expert. Turn on any financial news channel for 30 minutes, and you'll come away convinced of one thing: investing is extraordinarily complicated, and you are not qualified to do it. You'll hear about yield curves and quantitative easing, about earnings multiples and macroeconomic headwinds, about rotating out of growth into value, and whether the Fed's next move signals a soft landing or a coming correction. The language is dense, the opinions are confident, and the overall impression is that navigating the financial markets requires either a finance degree, a Bloomberg terminal, or a very expensive advisor who is both. This impression is not an accident. Complexity is profitable for the people selling complexity. The financial services industry generates billions of dollars annually from the belief that investing requires expert guidance. And so the myth is maintained. The language stays deliberately intimidating, and millions of ordinary people sit on the sidelines of the greatest wealth-building mechanism in modern history because they don't feel qualified to participate. Here is the truth that the industry would rather you discovered too late. The most effective investment strategy available to ordinary people is also the simplest one. It requires no expertise, no market timing, no stock picking, and no financial advisor. It requires only consistency, patience, and a basic understanding of one concept. That concept is the index fund, and it has quietly made more ordinary people wealthy than any other investment vehicle in history. What an index fund actually is. Strip away all the financial jargon, and an index fund is remarkably straightforward. The stock market contains thousands of individual companies. Some of them will perform brilliantly over the next decade. Some will perform terribly. Some will go bankrupt. The challenge that Wall Street has built an entire industry around, is figuring out in advance which is which. Professionals with enormous resources, sophisticated algorithms, and decades of experience attempt to do this every single day. And the data is humbling. The majority of actively managed funds run by expert stock pickers, fail to outperform the simple average of the market over long periods. An index fund doesn't try to beat the market. It simply owns the market. It buys small pieces of every company in a given index. The S&P 500, for example, which represents the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States, and holds them all. When the market goes up, the fund goes up. When it goes down, the fund goes down. There's no manager making judgment calls, no expensive research team, no complex trading strategy, just a mirror held up to the broad market. Because there's no active management, the fees are extraordinarily low, often as little as 0.03% to 0.20% annually, compared to 1% or more for actively managed funds. That fee difference, compounded over decades, represents a staggering amount of money that stays in your account rather than going to a fund manager. The simplicity is not a weakness. It is the strategy, the myth of perfect timing. One of the most common reasons people delay investing is the belief that they need to wait for the right moment. The market feels too high. There might be a crash coming. They'll start after the next election, after things stabilize, after they understand things a little better. This instinct feels prudent. It is actually one of the most expensive habits in personal finance. Consider this. If you had invested $10,000 in a broad U.S. index fund at the single worst possible moment of every decade, the exact market peak before every major crash, your returns over 30 years would still comfortably outperform leaving that money in a savings account. The market's long-term trajectory is upward, and the cost of waiting for the perfect entry point is consistently higher than the cost of entering at an imperfect one. There's a concept in investing called time in the market versus timing the market. Decades of data support a clear conclusion. The amount of time your money spends invested matters far more than the specific moment you chose to invest it. Every month spent waiting on the sidelines is a month of compound growth that cannot be recovered. The best time to invest was years ago. The second best time is today. The bus driver's portfolio. Consider someone like David, a city bus driver who never earned more than $45,000 a year, had no financial education beyond what he'd picked up from a library book in his 30s, and never once tried to pick an individual stock or predict where the market was heading. What David did do was simple. At 32, he opened a retirement account through his employer and directed $200 a month into a single low-cost index fund. He never changed the fund. He never adjusted his strategy based on news headlines. When the market dropped significantly, as it did multiple times over his career, he did nothing. When it rose dramatically, he did the same nothing. He just kept contributing $200 a month, every month, for 30 years. At 62, David's account held just over $400,000. He contributed a total of $72,000 over those 30 years. The remaining $328,000 was generated by the market, by the simple, patient act of owning a small piece of the American economy and letting time do the work. No expertise required. No stress. No Bloomberg terminal. David's story isn't remarkable because of what he did. It's remarkable because of what he didn't do. He didn't let complexity, fear, or the noise of financial media talk him out of the simplest strategy available: tuning out the noise. This might be the most underrated investing skill of all, and it costs nothing to develop: the ability to ignore financial news. Financial media has a fundamental problem. It needs to fill airtime and generate clicks every single day, in a domain where the correct advice for long-term investors is almost never newsworthy. Continue holding your index funds and don't change anything does not make for compelling television. So instead, the content is built around urgency, prediction, and the illusion that constant action is required. The research on investor behavior consistently shows that the more frequently people check and react to their investment accounts, the worse their returns tend to be. The impulse to do something in response to market volatility, to sell when things drop, to buy aggressively when things are rising, consistently underperforms the strategy of doing nothing at all. The financial news cycle is, for the long-term index fund investor, almost entirely irrelevant. The investor's job is to contribute consistently and ignore the rest. Every hour spent watching market commentary is an hour spent being tempted to interfere with a strategy that works precisely because it isn't interfered with. Turn it off. The market will do what it does. Your only job is to stay in it. Starting small is starting right. Another barrier that keeps people out of investing longer than necessary is the belief that small amounts aren't worth the effort. Why open an investment account for $50 a month? What difference does that actually make? The answer, as we touched on in the previous chapter and will return to in Chapter 7, is compound growth over time. But beyond the mathematics, there is a psychological and behavioral argument for starting small that is equally important. Investing is a habit before it is a strategy. The person who invests $50 a month for a year has developed something more valuable than the $600 in their account. They've developed the identity of someone who invests. They've built the habit infrastructure, overcome the inertia, established the account, learned the mechanics, and proven to themselves that they can do this. When their income grows, Scaling up is trivial. The hard part, starting, is already behind them. The person who waits until they have enough to make it worthwhile is still waiting 5 years later, now with 5 years of compound growth that can never be recovered. Start with what you have. Scale with what you earn. The amount matters less than the habit. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Set up a low-cost index fund investment. If you have a workplace retirement account, confirm that your contributions are directed into a low-cost index fund. Look for funds with index in the name and expense ratios below 0.2%. If you don't have a workplace account, open a Roth IRA or basic brokerage account with a provider like Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab, and select a total market or S&P 500 index fund. This single action, taken once, can work on your behalf for decades. Action 2. Implement the set and forget rule. Once your index fund contribution is automated, remove the temptation to interfere by deliberately reducing how often you check your investment account. Set a calendar reminder for a quarterly review. 4 times a year is more than sufficient, and commit to making no changes based on short-term market movements. The rule is simple. Contribute consistently, review quarterly, change nothing based on news. Action 3. Unsubscribe from financial noise. Identify one source of financial media you currently consume, a newsletter, a news channel, a social media account focused on market movements and stock tips, and unsubscribe or unfollow it this week. Replace it, if you want a replacement, with a single resource focused on long-term, evidence-based investing. Protecting your attention from urgency-driven financial content is one of the highest return investments you can make. You do not need to understand the economy to benefit from it. You do not need to predict the market to profit from it. You do not need a financial advisor, a trading strategy, or a sophisticated understanding of macroeconomic forces. You need consistency, patience, and the wisdom to keep it simple when everything around you is telling you to make it complicated. David figured that out with a library book and a $200 monthly contribution. The tools available to you today are better, cheaper, and more accessible than anything he had. The only question is whether you'll use them. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about something most financial books address too timidly: the ceiling on your income. Because investing matters enormously, but it matters even more when there's more to invest. And raising your income doesn't have to mean what most people think it means. Chapter 6. Your income has a ceiling until you remove it. Let's be honest about something that most personal finance advice dances around. Frugality has limits. You can audit your spending, cancel your subscriptions, brew your own coffee, and optimize every dollar of your existing income. And all of that matters, genuinely. But at some point, you hit a floor. There are only so many expenses to cut before you're living a life stripped of comfort and joy, having sacrificed the present entirely for a future that hasn't arrived yet. The defensive game of spending less has a ceiling on how much it can accomplish. The offensive game, earning more, has no such ceiling. This is the chapter most financial books either skip entirely or bury under vague encouragement to consider a side hustle. We're going to go deeper than that, because the conversation around additional income has been cluttered with bad advice, unrealistic expectations, and a culture of hustle that has made the idea of earning more feel exhausting before you've even begun. The truth is more nuanced and more encouraging than either extreme. You don't need to work 80 hours a week. You don't need to build a startup. You don't need to become an influencer or a dropshipper or a crypto trader. What you need is a clear understanding of the difference between types of income, a realistic assessment of what you already have to offer, and the willingness to run one small experiment. The single income problem. A single income stream is, by definition, a single point of failure. If that one stream is interrupted by a layoff, an illness, an industry disruption, a company restructuring, your entire financial life is immediately at risk. No matter how well you've saved or invested, the sudden loss of your only income source triggers a crisis that can undo years of careful progress in a matter of months. This isn't a rare scenario. It's a common one. Industries transform. Companies downsize. Roles become automated. The idea of a single employer providing stable, lifelong income has been eroding for decades, and the people most vulnerable to that erosion are those who never built anything alongside their primary job. But the argument for multiple income streams isn't only defensive. It's also mathematical. Every additional dollar of income that you don't need for immediate expenses is a dollar available for investment. The faster your investment base grows, the faster compound growth accelerates. A second income stream doesn't just protect you, it dramatically accelerates the timeline to financial freedom. Active versus passive, understanding the spectrum. Before diving into how to build additional income, it's worth being clear about what we mean, because not all income is created equal, and the distinctions matter enormously for your long-term freedom. Active income requires your direct, ongoing time and effort. Your salary is active income. Freelance work is active income. Tutoring, consulting, driving for a rideshare platform, all active. There's nothing wrong with active income. It's how most additional earnings begin. But it has an inherent limitation. It scales with your time, and your time is finite. Passive income, by contrast, continues generating revenue without requiring your continuous involvement. Rental income, dividend payments from investments, royalties from a book or a course, revenue from a digital product. These are examples of income streams that, once established, produce returns without a direct hourly exchange. They typically require significant upfront effort or investment to build, but once running, they operate largely independently. The goal, over time, is to move along this spectrum from purely active income toward a mix that includes growing passive components. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without work. But understanding the spectrum helps you make better decisions about where to direct your energy. Not every additional income effort needs to be passive from day one. Active income earned today can be invested to create passive income tomorrow. The two work together. The monetizable skill you already have. Here's where most people get stuck. They assume that building additional income requires learning something entirely new, launching something elaborate, or competing in an already crowded market. In reality, the fastest path to a second income stream almost always runs directly through skills you've already spent years developing. Every professional has a set of capabilities that took time to build and that other people genuinely need. A marketing coordinator knows how to write copy and run campaigns. An accountant knows how to organize financial records and navigate tax implications. A teacher knows how to explain complex ideas clearly. A nurse knows more about health management than most people will ever learn. A project manager knows how to keep teams organized and deliverables on track. These skills feel ordinary to the people who have them, because they've had them so long that they've forgotten what it was like not to. But to someone who needs that capability and doesn't have it, they are genuinely valuable. The freelance economy has made it easier than ever to connect people who have specific skills with people and businesses that need them. The question isn't whether you have something worth offering. You do. The question is whether you've identified it clearly enough to offer it. Nina's weekend experiment. Nina was a 38-year-old HR manager who spent her weekends doing something she genuinely loved, making handmade ceramics. Bowls, mugs, small sculptural pieces. She'd been doing it for years purely as a creative outlet, filling her apartment with pieces she made and occasionally giving them as gifts. A friend suggested she try selling some. Nina resisted. She didn't want to turn her hobby into a job, didn't think what she made was good enough for people to pay for, and had no idea where to even start. Eventually, she listed 6 pieces on an online marketplace. All 6 sold within 2 weeks. She made $340. That was enough to make her curious. She kept making, kept listing, started paying attention to which pieces sold fastest and at what price points. She wasn't trying to build a business. She was running an experiment. 14 months later, her ceramics were generating an average of $1,100 a month, almost entirely during time she would have spent making them anyway. Nina didn't quit her job. She didn't want to. But that $1,100 a month, directed entirely into investments, changed her financial trajectory in ways her HR salary alone never could have. The income wasn't the product of grinding or sacrifice. It was the product of curiosity, a small initial action, and the willingness to see what happened. Not every experiment produces Nina's result. Some produce less, some produce more. The point isn't the outcome of the first experiment. It's the information and momentum it generates. Reframing the side hustle. The phrase side hustle has accumulated a lot of cultural baggage. It conjures images of exhausted people working late into the night after a full day at their primary job, grinding endlessly toward a goal that keeps receding. For many people, the concept feels like a threat disguised as an opportunity. More work, more stress, less life. This framing is worth challenging directly. The goal is not to add a second job to your life. The goal is to run a small, low-stakes experiment in monetizing something you already have: a skill, a creative output, a piece of knowledge, an asset. The experiment should start small enough that failure costs little and success can be built upon. It should be connected, where possible, to something you'd be doing anyway or something that genuinely interests you. And it should be evaluated honestly after a defined trial period, not abandoned at the first sign of difficulty, but also not clung to if the experiment clearly isn't working. Think of it less as a hustle and more as a probe. You're gathering information about what the market will pay for what you have to offer. That information is genuinely valuable, regardless of the immediate financial result. The reinvestment principle. One final concept that separates people who build lasting financial momentum from those who earn more but never get ahead. What you do with the first money from a new income stream matters enormously. The temptation when additional income arrives is to expand your lifestyle to absorb it. The experiment works, the money starts coming in, and gradually it gets folded into everyday spending: a nicer apartment, more dining out, upgraded gadgets. The additional income becomes invisible because the lifestyle has grown to consume it. The alternative, and the approach that compounds into genuine freedom, is to treat every dollar from a new income stream as untouchable for at least the first 6 months. Direct it entirely toward debt acceleration, investment contributions, or a specific financial goal. Build the habit of treating additional income as capital before you ever treat it as spending money. The first $500 from a new income stream, invested rather than spent, becomes the foundation of a habit that can change your financial life. It signals to yourself, not symbolically, but practically, that this money has a different job. And money with a clear job almost always outperforms money that's simply absorbed. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Identify your monetizable skill. Write down 3 things you know how to do professionally or personally that other people regularly need help with. Then write down one specific type of person or business that would benefit from each skill. You don't need to act on this immediately. You need to see it clearly first. Specificity is everything. Not, I'm good at writing, but I can write clear, engaging email campaigns for small e-commerce businesses. Action 2. Design one micro-income experiment. Based on your monetizable skill or an existing interest, design the smallest possible version of an income experiment. One freelance project. 5 products listed on a marketplace. One service offered to someone in your network. Give it a 90-day trial with a clear, modest goal: not replace my income, but generate my first $200. The size of the goal is intentional. Small goals get started. Large goals get planned forever. Action 3. Commit to reinvesting your first $500. Before your experiment begins, make a decision in advance about what happens to the first $500 it generates. Write it down. Direct it specifically toward a named debt, a named investment account, a named goal. The decision made in advance, before the money arrives, is the one most likely to be honored. The decision made in the moment, when the money is in your account and options are tempting, is the one most likely to evaporate. Your salary is not the final word on your financial potential. It is one data point, important, but not immovable, and certainly not the only one that matters. The income ceiling exists only as long as you accept it as permanent, and removing it doesn't require reinventing your life. It requires identifying what you already have, running one honest experiment, and treating the results as the beginning of something, not the end. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the force that makes everything we've discussed so far dramatically more powerful. It doesn't require more income, more discipline, or more expertise. It requires only time and the understanding of why time, in personal finance, is the most valuable asset most people are unknowingly wasting. Chapter 7. The Compound Effect, the most underrated force in personal finance. There is a question that has been used in financial education for decades, and it still stops people cold when they encounter it for the first time. Would you rather have $1 million today or a single penny that doubles every day for 30 days? Most people, when they hear it casually, choose the million. It's concrete. It's immediate. It's real in a way that a doubling penny feels too abstract to be. The penny, on day 30, is worth $5,368,709. That gap between what human intuition expects and what exponential growth actually produces is the gap that determines, more than almost any other factor, whether a person builds lasting wealth or spends their life wondering why the numbers never quite add up. We are not wired to understand compound growth intuitively. Our brains think linearly. Compound growth is anything but linear, and the disconnect between how we think and how money actually behaves is one of the most consequential mismatches in personal finance. This chapter is about closing that gap, the math behind the magic. Compound growth, at its most basic, means earning returns not just on your original investment, but on every previous return as well. Your money earns money, and then that money earns money, and the base keeps expanding with each cycle. In the early years, this feels almost insultingly slow. Invest $10,000 at 7% annual return, and after year 1, you have $10,700. After year 2, $11,449. After year 5, roughly $14,026. Nothing that would make you feel like you'd unlocked a financial superpower. But stay with it. After year 10, that $10,000 has become approximately $19,672. After year 20, $38,697. After year 30, $76,123. The original investment has grown more than 7 times over, and you did nothing beyond the initial decision to invest and the discipline not to touch it. Now add regular contributions. If instead of a single $10,000 investment, you contribute $300 a month into an account growing at 7% annually, after 30 years you have contributed $108,000 of your own money. Your account balance is approximately $340,000. The market generated $232,000, more than twice what you put in, simply through the mechanism of compounding over time. This is not a trick. It is not a special financial product or an exclusive opportunity. It is the ordinary, reliable behavior of invested money left alone for long enough. The magic is not in the mechanism. The magic is in the patience. Why people miss it? If compound growth is this powerful, why don't more people take full advantage of it? The answer comes down to 3 interconnected failures: starting late, stopping early, and underestimating the cost of both. Starting late is the most common and most expensive mistake. Every year of delay at the beginning of an investment journey costs disproportionately more than a year of delay later on, because the years at the beginning are the ones that have the most time to compound. A dollar invested at 25 is worth dramatically more at 65 than a dollar invested at 35. Not a little more, dramatically more. Consider Tom and Yuki. Two people with identical monthly investment amounts of $300, identical returns of 7% annually, and one critical difference. Tom started at 25. Yuki started at 35. By age 65, Tom's portfolio has grown to approximately $790,000. Yuki's has grown to approximately $380,000. Same discipline, same monthly commitment, same returns. A difference of $410,000 produced entirely by 10 years of earlier starting. Yuki didn't do anything wrong. Life intervened, student loans, an early career that didn't pay much, competing financial priorities. These are real and valid obstacles. But understanding the cost of those 10 years in concrete terms changes how urgently you approach starting today, regardless of how late you feel you already are. Stopping early is the second failure. People cash out investments during market downturns, redirect contributions when money feels tight, or simply lose patience when the early years of slow growth feel discouraging. Each interruption resets part of the compounding clock and extracts money from the process at precisely the moments when staying in is most important. The third failure is subtler, underestimating fees. A 1% annual management fee sounds negligible. Over 30 years on a growing portfolio, it can consume 25% or more of your total returns, money that would otherwise have been compounding on your behalf. This is why low-cost index funds, as discussed in the previous chapter, aren't just slightly better than high-fee alternatives. They're dramatically better because every fraction of a percentage point saved in fees is a fraction that compounds in your favor instead. The boring millionaire. There exists a personality type in personal finance that rarely appears in the media because their story lacks the drama that audiences supposedly demand. Call them the boring millionaire. They didn't start a company. They didn't make a brilliant investment call. They didn't inherit money or marry into it or get lucky with a stock tip. They simply started investing early, contributed consistently, chose low-cost index funds, and left everything alone for a very long time. Their story, told as a narrative, is genuinely uneventful. Month after month, year after year, the contributions went in and the account grew, and nothing remarkable happened except the quiet, relentless arithmetic of compounding doing exactly what it always does when given enough time. These people exist in extraordinary numbers. They are your neighbors, your colleagues, the quiet retirees living comfortably without any dramatic origin story to explain it. The financial media doesn't feature them because person invested consistently for 30 years and now has enough doesn't generate clicks. But their approach is available to virtually anyone, at virtually any income level, who starts early enough and stays patient enough. The boring millionaire's secret isn't a secret at all. It's just uncomfortable in its simplicity because it offers no shortcut, no hack, no exciting pivot. Just time and consistency and the refusal to be distracted. Protecting the principal. One of the most important and least discussed aspects of compound growth is what happens when you interrupt it. When you withdraw from an investment account early, you don't just lose the amount withdrawn. You lose all future compounding that amount would have generated. Withdraw $10,000 from an investment account that had 20 years left to grow at 7%, and you haven't just lost $10,000. You've lost approximately $38,000, the value that $10,000 would have become. This is why financial advisors speak so seriously about emergency funds and why this book has emphasized them repeatedly. The emergency fund isn't just about having cash available when things go wrong. It's about protecting your invested principal from being interrupted. Every dollar in your emergency fund is a shield around your investment account, ensuring that a car repair or a medical bill or a job loss doesn't force you to extract money from a compounding process that is working exactly as intended. Protecting the principal is not passive. It requires deliberate architecture, the right amount in liquid savings, the right insurance coverage, the right level of monthly stability, so that your investments are insulated from the inevitable turbulence of real life. Build the shield. Then let the compounding work behind it, undisturbed. The 10-year rule. A useful mental framework for anyone beginning or recommitting to long-term investing is what we might call the 10-year rule. When you invest money, mentally commit to not touching it for at least 10 years. This isn't always literally possible. Life changes, circumstances shift. But as a default posture, it accomplishes something important. It reframes the investment from a liquid resource you might tap into a long-term commitment you've already made. It reduces the psychological availability of the money for short-term temptations. And it aligns your expectations with the actual timeline over which compound growth becomes genuinely powerful. Money committed to a 10-year horizon tends to stay invested through market downturns because you've already told yourself it isn't available for a decade. Money thought of as accessible tends to get accessed, often at exactly the wrong moment. The 10-year rule is not a legal constraint. It's a mental one. But mental constraints, consistently applied, produce real financial outcomes. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Run your own compound calculator. Go to any free online compound interest calculator and input your current investment balance, your planned monthly contribution, and an assumed annual return of 7%. Then look at the projected balance at 3 different time horizons: 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. Watch how dramatically the numbers diverge over time. Save a screenshot. Look at it the next time you're tempted to skip a contribution or withdraw from your account early. Action 2. Commit to the 10-year rule. For every investment account you currently hold or plan to open, write down a commitment date, the date 10 years from today, and treat that as the earliest you will consider accessing those funds for non-emergency purposes. Write this down somewhere visible. The act of naming the commitment makes it psychologically real in a way that vague intentions never are. Action 3. Protect your principal at all costs. Review your current emergency fund. If it holds less than 3 months of living expenses, make growing it your immediate financial priority, above additional investing, above discretionary spending, above everything except essential bills and minimum debt payments. A fully funded emergency fund is not a conservative choice. It is the foundation that allows your investments to compound without interruption, which makes it one of the highest return actions available to you right now. Compound growth does not care about your income level, your educational background, your past financial mistakes, or the years you've already lost to not knowing about it. It cares about one thing only: time. Specifically, the time between when you start and when you stop. You cannot recover the years already behind you. But you can start today, and today, compounded forward, is worth more than you think. Tom started at 25 and built $790,000. Yuki started at 35 and built $380,000. Both numbers represent freedom. Both were built by ordinary people making ordinary monthly contributions over an ordinary working life. The only extraordinary ingredient was the decision to begin. In the next chapter, we're going to go somewhere most financial books are reluctant to go: inside your head. Because everything we've covered so far assumes rational, consistent financial behavior. But human beings aren't rational about money. We're emotional. We're shaped by history. And until we understand the beliefs driving our financial behavior, even the best strategies in the world will struggle to take hold. Chapter 8. The Mindset Tax: How Your Beliefs Are Costing You Money. Everything in this book so far has been practical: audits and debt maps and index funds and compound calculators. Concrete tools for concrete problems. And all of it matters. Genuinely, measurably matters. But here is something that took the financial psychology research community decades to fully articulate, and that most personal finance books still underemphasize. Financial behavior is almost never primarily rational. It is primarily emotional. And emotions, in turn, are almost never random. They are the surface expression of something deeper, a set of beliefs, absorbed early and reinforced often, that quietly govern every financial decision you make, whether you're aware of them or not. You can hand someone a perfect financial plan, the right savings rate, the right investment vehicle, the right debt payoff strategy, and watch them fail to execute it. Not because the plan is wrong, because something inside them is working against it. A belief that they don't deserve financial security. A conviction, absorbed from childhood, that money is dangerous or corrupting or perpetually scarce. A pattern of self-sabotage that activates every time financial progress reaches a certain threshold, as if an invisible hand keeps pulling them back to a familiar level of struggle. This invisible hand is what we're going to examine in this chapter. And examining it, clearly, honestly, without judgment, is often the single most transformative financial act a person can take. Where money beliefs come from. Long before you ever earned your first dollar, you were already developing a relationship with money. You were watching. You watched how the adults around you talked about it, or didn't talk about it. You absorbed the emotional atmosphere that surrounded financial conversations in your household. Was money discussed openly and practically, as a tool to be understood and managed? Or was it a source of tension, secrecy, shame, or anxiety? Was there always enough? Or was scarcity a constant undercurrent? Were wealthy people admired or resented? Was financial ambition encouraged or treated with suspicion? These early observations didn't stay as memories. They became templates, unconscious frameworks through which all subsequent financial experiences were filtered and interpreted. Psychologists and financial therapists call these money scripts, the core narratives we carry about what money is, what it means, who deserves it, and what happens to people who have it or don't. The insidious thing about money scripts is that they operate below the level of conscious decision-making. You don't choose to believe that money is scarce. You don't decide to feel guilty when your finances improve. These responses are automatic, wired in early, and extraordinarily resistant to logical argument, because logic operates in the conscious mind, and money scripts live somewhere much deeper. The four money scripts. Financial therapy research has identified four primary money script patterns that shape financial behavior in predictable ways. The first is money avoidance, the belief that money is bad, corrupting, or that truly good people shouldn't care too much about it. People with strong money avoidance scripts often unconsciously sabotage financial progress because success feels morally uncomfortable. They under-earn relative to their capabilities, give money away compulsively, or find reasons to spend windfalls before they can accumulate. The second is money worship, the belief that more money will solve all problems and that financial acquisition is the primary path to happiness and security. This script drives overwork, financial risk-taking, and the persistent feeling that no amount of money is ever quite enough. Paradoxically, it can produce high earners who are no closer to financial freedom than people earning a fraction of their income, because the goalposts keep moving. The third is money status, the use of financial displays to establish social worth and signal success to others. Spending driven by this script is heavily influenced by comparison, what others have, what others see, what your financial choices communicate about your place in a social hierarchy. This is the engine behind lifestyle creep and the reason so many people increase their spending in lockstep with every income increase. The fourth is money vigilance, an excessive caution around spending and financial security that, while producing good saving habits on the surface, can cross into anxiety, secrecy, and an inability to enjoy the financial security that's been built. The vigilant saver who can't spend money on anything without guilt, or who lives in persistent financial fear despite having objectively adequate resources, is operating from this script. Most people carry elements of more than one script, and none of them are absolute. They exist on a spectrum, and their influence varies by context. The goal is not to eliminate them entirely, but to become conscious of them, so that they inform rather than control. Priya's story. Priya grew up in a household where money was permanently, viscerally scarce. Her parents worked constantly and still struggled. Financial stress was the background noise of her entire childhood, the tight faces when bills arrived, the careful rationing of everything, the unspoken but ever-present anxiety that there was never quite enough and never would be. She internalized a simple, powerful belief: money runs out. No matter how much you have, it runs out. The appropriate response to financial resources is to grip them tightly, spend as little as possible, and expect eventual loss. By her mid-30s, Priya was earning $85,000 a year, more than her parents had ever made combined. And yet she was financially paralyzed. She kept most of her money in a low-yield savings account because investing felt like gambling, and gambling meant losing everything. She avoided looking at her finances closely because the anxiety it triggered was unbearable. Every time she began to accumulate a meaningful amount of savings, she found a reason to make a large, destabilizing purchase: a renovation she didn't need, a car upgrade that wasn't warranted, as if her nervous system couldn't tolerate the dissonance between her current reality and her childhood template of scarcity. She wasn't making irrational decisions. She was making perfectly rational decisions. For someone whose deepest financial belief was that security is temporary and loss is inevitable. The behavior made complete sense given the script. The script, not the behavior, was the problem. When Priya began working with a financial therapist and started examining these beliefs directly, tracing them to their origin, testing them against her actual current reality, and deliberately building new evidence-based narratives, her financial behavior shifted in ways that no spreadsheet or budget had ever produced. She began investing. She stopped the self-sabotage. She built, for the first time, a financial life that reflected her actual circumstances rather than her childhood fears. Her income hadn't changed. Her relationship with money had. The scarcity mindset and its costs. Beyond individual money scripts, there is a broader cognitive pattern worth understanding: the scarcity mindset. Research by behavioral economists Sindel Mullainathan and Eldar Schaffer demonstrated that the experience of scarcity, of not having enough of something important, captures cognitive bandwidth in ways that impair decision-making across all domains. People experiencing financial scarcity make measurably worse financial decisions, not because they are less intelligent or less capable, but because the mental load of managing scarcity consumes the cognitive resources needed for good judgment. This creates a cruel feedback loop. Financial stress impairs the decision-making needed to escape financial stress. The people who most need good financial judgment are operating with the least of it, not through any personal failing, but through the simple mechanics of how scarcity affects the brain. Understanding this doesn't excuse poor financial decisions, but it does reframe them, from moral failures to predictable human responses to difficult circumstances. And that reframing matters, because shame is one of the most powerful inhibitors of financial change. People who feel judged for their financial situation tend to disengage from it, to avoid looking at it, to defer the uncomfortable work of addressing it. People who understand that their struggles are human and addressable are far more likely to engage. Compassion toward your past financial self is not self-indulgence. It is a practical prerequisite for change. Rewriting the script. The process of identifying and revising money scripts is not psychotherapy, though for some people, working with a financial therapist is genuinely valuable and worth pursuing. For most people, it begins with 3 simpler steps. The first is articulation, writing down your money story. Not your financial history, your emotional history with money. What was money like in your household growing up? What did you observe, absorb, and conclude? What beliefs about money, wealth, and financial people did you develop? Getting these beliefs out of your head and onto paper makes them visible, and visible beliefs can be examined in ways that invisible ones cannot. The second is identification, finding the specific limiting beliefs embedded in that story. Not vague impressions, but concrete statements. Rich people are greedy. I'm not good with money. We're just not the kind of family that has savings. No matter what I do, I'll end up back where I started. These statements feel like truths. They are actually hypotheses, and like all hypotheses, they can be tested against evidence. The third is replacement, constructing an evidence-based counterbelief for each limiting one. Not a hollow affirmation, but a belief grounded in actual data from your own life and the lives of people you know or have read about. Rich people are greedy can be countered not with rich people are wonderful, but with financial security doesn't determine character. I've known generous people at every income level. The replacement doesn't have to be the opposite of the original. It just has to be more accurate. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Write your money story. Set aside 30 uninterrupted minutes and write about your earliest memories and experiences with money. What was the financial atmosphere of your childhood home? What did you hear adults say about money, wealth, and financial people? What conclusions did you draw? Write without editing or judgment. The goal is excavation, not presentation. What you find will tell you more about your current financial behavior than any bank statement. Action 2. Identify 3 limiting beliefs. From what you've written, extract 3 specific belief statements that are shaping your financial behavior in ways that don't serve you. Write each one as a clear, direct sentence. Then, next to each one, write a single piece of evidence from your own life that contradicts it, because the evidence almost certainly exists. Limiting beliefs persist partly because we never look for the contradicting data. Action 3. Replace each belief with an evidence-based counterstatement. For each of the 3 limiting beliefs, write a replacement, not an overcorrection, but a more accurate and more useful belief grounded in reality. Then read all 3 replacements aloud, daily, for 30 days. This is not mysticism. It is the deliberate, repetitive practice of installing a new cognitive pattern to compete with an old one. Repetition is how the original beliefs were installed. Repetition is how they get revised. Financial freedom is not just a mathematical achievement. It is a psychological one. The numbers matter enormously, but the numbers are downstream of the beliefs, and the beliefs are upstream of everything. Priya eventually built an investment portfolio that would have been unimaginable to the girl who grew up watching her parents worry about every bill. Not because her income was exceptional, because she did the harder, quieter work of understanding what she believed about money and deciding, deliberately, to believe something more true. That work is available to everyone. It costs nothing but honesty, and it unlocks everything else. In the next chapter, we're going to bring the psychological and the practical together, because knowing what to do and actually doing it consistently are 2 very different things. The bridge between them isn't willpower. It's systems. And building the right system is simpler than you think. Chapter 9. Building a system, not a budget. Ask anyone who has ever started a diet on a Monday how they feel about willpower. They'll tell you it works brilliantly for about 2 weeks, maybe 3, if the initial motivation was particularly strong. And then life intervenes. A stressful week at work, a social obligation that disrupts the routine, 1 bad day that becomes 2, then a week, then a quiet abandonment of the whole project accompanied by a private promise to try again next month. Budgets fail for exactly the same reason diets fail. Not because the people attempting them lack intelligence or genuine desire. Because they are built on a foundation that cannot hold indefinitely. The daily, active deployment of willpower against a constant stream of competing impulses, inconveniences, and temptations. Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes throughout the day. It weakens under stress, fatigue, and emotional pressure, which is to say, it weakens under the exact conditions that most financial decisions get made. Designing a financial life that depends on willpower is designing one that is guaranteed to fail under pressure. And financial pressure is not occasional. For most people, it is a permanent feature of the landscape. The solution is not more willpower. It is less need for it. And that's precisely what a well-designed financial system provides. Why budgets fail. Before we build something better, it's worth being precise about why the conventional budget, the detailed monthly spending plan that personal finance culture treats as the cornerstone of financial responsibility, fails so consistently. The first problem is complexity. A traditional budget asks you to track and actively manage spending across a dozen or more categories simultaneously. Every purchase requires a mental consultation. Which category does this belong to? How much remains in that category? Is this within my allocated amount? This cognitive overhead is manageable when life is calm. When life is busy, which is most of the time, it becomes exhausting, then ignored, then abandoned. The second problem is rigidity. A budget built in the calm of a Sunday afternoon assumes a level of predictability that real life simply doesn't provide. An unexpected car repair, a friend's birthday dinner, a work trip with reimbursement delays. Any of these can blow a carefully constructed budget in a single day, leaving the person feeling like a failure rather than understanding that the system was insufficiently flexible. The third problem is the psychological relationship budgets create with spending. A budget turns every discretionary purchase into a potential violation, a moment of judgment, guilt, or internal negotiation. Money becomes associated with restriction and failure rather than choice and agency. Over time, this association makes people want to disengage from financial management entirely, which is precisely the opposite of what good financial health requires. A system solves all three problems simultaneously. It is simple by design, flexible by structure, and removes the emotional charge from everyday spending by automating the important decisions in advance. The pay yourself first principle. The philosophical foundation of a good financial system is a concept that has existed in personal finance for over a century, has been validated repeatedly by behavioral research, and is still underutilized by the majority of people who've heard of it. Pay yourself first. The conventional approach to saving looks like this. Income arrives, bills get paid, life gets lived, and whatever remains at the end of the month gets saved. The problem with this approach is structural. Savings is treated as a residual, the leftover after everything else has happened. And in most households, at most income levels, the residual is small, inconsistent, and easily consumed by unexpected expenses or lifestyle expansion. Paying yourself first inverts this entirely. Before bills are paid, before groceries are bought, before any discretionary spending occurs, a predetermined amount moves automatically into savings and investments. Your financial future gets paid before your present gets funded. What remains after that automatic transfer is yours to spend freely on whatever you want, without guilt, without tracking, without a budget category. Because the important work has already been done. This approach works for a reason that goes beyond simple math. When money is removed from your checking account on the day your paycheck arrives, it never fully registers as available. Your brain calibrates its sense of what I have to spend based on what's visible in your account. Remove the savings component immediately, and that component effectively disappears from your psychological spending pool. You adapt to the smaller number. The saving happens invisibly, automatically, and without requiring a single act of willpower. The three-account architecture. The most practical implementation of a pay-yourself-first system is built on three distinct accounts, each with a specific and non-overlapping purpose. Account 1 is your flow account, your primary checking account where your income arrives and from which your fixed bills are paid. This account is the operational hub of your financial life. It receives your paycheck and immediately routes money to the other two accounts before anything else happens. Account 2 is your safety account, a high-yield savings account that holds your emergency fund and any short-term savings goals. This account is not for investment. It is for protection and near-term planning. the fund that keeps your investment accounts untouched when life gets unpredictable. Ideally, this account is at a different bank than your flow account, creating a small but meaningful friction that discourages casual withdrawal. Account 3 is your growth account, your investment vehicle. This could be a workplace retirement account, a Roth IRA, a brokerage account, or some combination. This is where your financial future is being built, slowly and automatically, with every paycheck. The system works as follows. Your paycheck hits the flow account on the same day, automatically, without any action required from you. A predetermined amount transfers to your safety account, and another predetermined amount transfers to or funds your growth account. What remains in the flow account is your spending money for the month. No categories, no tracking, no guilt. You've already done the right thing. Everything left is yours. Chris and the 20-minute month. Chris was a 41-year-old logistics manager who described himself, accurately, as someone who hated thinking about money. Not because he was irresponsible. He paid his bills, kept his debt manageable, and had a vague awareness that he should be saving more. He just found the mental overhead of active financial management deeply unpleasant, and his response to unpleasant things was consistent: avoidance. For years, this avoidance kept him financially stagnant. He wasn't in crisis, but he wasn't building anything either. His savings grew slowly and inconsistently. His investment account, opened with good intentions 4 years earlier, had received exactly 3 contributions. Then a colleague described a simple automation system, and Chris spent one Saturday afternoon, about 4 hours total, setting it up. He opened a high-yield savings account at an online bank, confirmed his workplace retirement account contributions were automated at 12% of his salary, and set up an automatic transfer of $400 a month to a Roth IRA, timed to the day after his paycheck arrived. He also scheduled what he called his monthly money meeting, 20 minutes, on the first Sunday of every month, to review his accounts, confirm the automations had run correctly, and check his progress against his goals. Nothing more. No detailed budget review, no transaction categorization, no complex analysis. Within 18 months, Chris had a fully funded emergency account for the first time in his adult life and was on track to retire comfortably at 63, 4 years earlier than he'd previously thought possible. The change in his financial outcomes was dramatic. The change in his daily life was almost imperceptible. He had simply removed money management from the domain of daily willpower and placed it in the domain of automated systems. For hours of setup, 20 minutes a month to maintain. A fundamentally different financial future. Designing your automation stack. Building your own version of Chris's system requires 4 specific decisions, made once and then largely left alone. The first decision is your savings rate, the percentage of your income that transfers automatically to your safety and growth accounts combined. Financial research suggests aiming for 20% overall, split between emergency savings and investment contributions. If 20% isn't currently possible, start with whatever is, 5%, 10%, and commit to increasing it by 1% every time your income increases. The automation matters more than the initial percentage. The second decision is timing, specifically, ensuring that your automatic transfers occur on the day your paycheck arrives or the day after. Timing is everything in pay-yourself-first systems. Money that sits in your checking account for a week before being transferred has already been mentally allocated to other purposes. Move it immediately. The third decision is account separation, keeping your safety and growth accounts at institutions that create a small barrier to access. Not an impassable barrier, but enough friction to interrupt impulsive withdrawals. An online savings account that takes 2 or 3 business days to transfer back to your checking account provides exactly the right amount of friction. The fourth decision is your monthly review schedule, the specific day and duration of your money meeting. 20 minutes is sufficient. The purpose is not analysis, but confirmation that the automations ran, that nothing unexpected occurred, and that your progress is on track. Consistency matters more than depth, spending freely within the system. One of the most liberating aspects of a well-designed financial system is what it does to your relationship with the money that remains after your automated transfers. When you know, with certainty, because the automation has already executed, that your savings and investments are funded for the month, the remaining money in your flow account is genuinely yours to spend. Not sort of yours, not yours with conditions, not yours subject to a budget category review. Yours, completely and guilt-free. This psychological shift is more significant than it might sound. Most people who try to manage money carefully live in a state of perpetual low-grade financial guilt, a background anxiety about whether they're spending correctly, saving enough, making the right choices. The system eliminates this anxiety not by removing financial responsibility, but by front-loading it. The responsible decisions happen automatically before you ever see the money. What remains is freedom. Spend it on whatever you value. Don't track it obsessively. Trust the system you've built. This is what financial management looks and feels like when it's working properly, not restriction and anxiety, but structure and freedom coexisting. 3 actions to take after this chapter. Action 1. Build your 3-account system. This week, identify or open the 3 accounts that will form your financial architecture. A primary checking account as your flow account, a high-yield savings account as your safety account, and an investment account as your growth account. If any of these already exist, confirm they are correctly positioned for their designated purpose. The infrastructure is the foundation. Everything else sits on top of it. Action 2. Automate your savings and investments. Set up automatic transfers from your flow account to your safety and growth accounts, timed to the day after your paycheck arrives. Start with whatever percentage is currently achievable. Even a small automation is infinitely better than a large manual intention. Then schedule a calendar reminder for 6 months from now to review and increase the percentage. Automate the increase too, if your bank allows recurring transfer adjustments. Action 3. Schedule your monthly 20-minute money meeting. Open your calendar right now and create a recurring monthly appointment. The same day each month, 20 minutes, marked as non-negotiable. Give it a name that feels positive rather than burdensome. During each meeting, check that your automations ran correctly. Review your progress toward your freedom number from Chapter 1, and make note of anything that needs attention. Keep it to 20 minutes. The discipline is in the consistency, not the duration. Budgets ask you to be perfect every day. Systems ask you to be thoughtful once, and then leave the machinery running. Chris isn't disciplined about money in the conventional sense. He doesn't track every purchase or agonize over discretionary spending. He built something that works without requiring him to be perfect, and then he got out of the way and let it work. That is the goal, not a financial life that demands constant vigilance and produces constant guilt. A financial life that runs quietly in the background, building your future while your present remains fully livable. You've now covered everything that needed to be covered: the spending, the debt, the saving, the investing, the income, the compounding, the mindset, the system. There is one chapter left, and it exists to answer the question this entire book has been building toward. How close are you really? Chapter 10. The Final Mile. How to know you're closer than you think. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from working without any sense of where you are. Runners experience it in long races. The miles blur together, the finish line feels abstract, and the effort required to keep going seems disproportionate to the progress being made. Not because the progress isn't real, but because there's no visible marker telling you how far you've come and how little remains. The exhaustion isn't physical. It's navigational. You're tired of not knowing where you are. This is how most people feel about their financial lives. Not necessarily overwhelmed by any single problem, but worn down by the absence of a clear map. They're moving, working, saving, occasionally investing, making small improvements, but without any framework that tells them where they stand relative to where they want to be. Financial freedom feels like a destination with no mileage sign, perpetually somewhere out there in the vague distance. This final chapter is the mileage sign. It exists to show you, concretely and honestly, where you are on the journey to financial freedom, and why the answer, for most people who've engaged seriously with the ideas in this book, is almost certainly closer than they assumed when they started reading. The 5 milestones of financial freedom. Financial freedom is not a binary state. You don't live in debt and struggle one day and wake up free the next. It is a progression, a series of distinct, meaningful thresholds that each represent a genuine expansion of your options, your security, and your peace of mind. Understanding these milestones serves 2 purposes. First, it gives you an honest assessment of where you currently stand. Second, it reframes the journey, because most people, when they see the milestones mapped clearly, discover they are further along than the vague, culturally inherited definition of financial freedom ever allowed them to recognize. Here are the 5 milestones. Milestone 1, financial stability. This is the foundation. You are financially stable when your income reliably covers your essential expenses, you have no debt in collections or an active crisis, and you have begun, even modestly, to build a financial cushion. Many people underestimate how significant this milestone is because it doesn't feel dramatic. But stability is not nothing. It is the platform from which every subsequent milestone becomes reachable. If you are here, you are not at the beginning of the road. You are on it. Milestone 2, financial buffer. You reach this milestone when you have a fully funded emergency account, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a liquid, accessible account, and your monthly cash flow is consistently positive. This means that an unexpected expense, while unwelcome, will not derail your financial life. It will not send you to a credit card, will not interrupt your investment contributions, will not undo months of careful progress. The buffer is the single most underappreciated milestone in personal finance. The psychological shift it produces, the quiet, solid confidence of knowing you can absorb a shock, is transformative in ways that are difficult to describe until you've experienced it. Milestone 3, debt freedom. You cross this threshold when all high-interest consumer debt has been eliminated, credit cards, personal loans, the accumulated obligations of a financial life that predates your current awareness. This milestone frees up a significant portion of your monthly income, money that was previously flowing to creditors and is now available for investment, for building, for living. It also removes a source of background stress that, as Chapter 3 explored, consumes cognitive bandwidth and impairs financial decision-making. Debt-free is not the finish line, but it is the point where the race fundamentally changes character. Milestone 4, financial independence. This is the milestone most people associate with financial freedom, and it is more reachable than cultural messaging suggests. You are financially independent when your investment portfolio and passive income streams generate enough to cover your essential living expenses without requiring you to draw on active employment income. You could lose your job tomorrow, and while it would be inconvenient, it would not be a crisis. Your lifestyle is funded. Your future is secured. This milestone doesn't require a specific dollar amount. It requires a specific ratio, as Chapter 1 established. When your passive income covers your freedom number, you are here. Milestone 5, full financial freedom. This is the complete version. When your financial assets generate enough to sustain not just your essential expenses, but your full desired lifestyle indefinitely, with a comfortable buffer for inflation and unexpected costs. This is the beachfront version, the no alarm clock version, the version culture has decided is the only valid definition of freedom. It is a worthy goal, but it is the 5th milestone, not the only one. And treating it as the only valid measure of progress is what causes people to feel perpetually behind when they are, in reality, significantly ahead. Where are you right now? Take a moment, genuinely, not rhetorically, to consider which milestone describes your current financial position. If you have stable income and no active financial crisis, you are at milestone 1. You are on the road. If you have a funded emergency account and positive monthly cash flow, you are at milestone 2. You have a foundation that most people never build. If you have eliminated high-interest consumer debt, you are at milestone 3. You have done something that the majority of adults in developed economies never accomplish. That is not a small thing. If your passive income and investment withdrawals can cover your essential expenses, you are at milestone 4. By any meaningful definition, you are financially independent, regardless of whether you've reached the culturally sanctioned version of freedom that requires yachts and zero obligations. The point of this exercise is not to manufacture false satisfaction with wherever you are. It is to replace the vague, demoralizing sense of perpetual inadequacy with an accurate, specific understanding of your actual position. Progress that is invisible is progress that doesn't motivate. Progress that is named and located on a real map is progress that compounds, not just financially, but psychologically. The progress you've already made. If you've read this book in sequence and taken the actions at the end of each chapter, something has already shifted. Perhaps you've done the spending audit and found money you didn't know you were losing. Perhaps you've built your debt map and chosen your payoff method. Perhaps you've opened an investment account, automated a transfer, or written down your money story for the first time. These actions don't feel dramatic. They rarely produce immediate, visible results. But they are the exact actions that, compounded over months and years, produce the financial transformations that look miraculous from the outside and ordinary from the inside. Every person whose financial life genuinely changed, every Marcus, every Rosa, every Chris, did it through a sequence of small, undramatic actions taken consistently over time. There was no single moment of transformation. There was a direction maintained. You now have a direction. That is worth more than most people ever acquire. 3 final actions. Action 1. Identify your current milestone. Using the 5 milestones described in this chapter, determine with honesty and specificity where you stand right now. Write it down. Name it. This is your starting point, not a judgment, not a permanent condition, but a coordinate on a map that now makes sense. Action 2. Write your 12-month freedom sprint. Based on your current milestone, define the single most important financial objective for the next 12 months. Make it specific, not save more money, but build a $9,000 emergency fund by March of next year. Attach a number, a deadline, and a monthly action that will get you there. Put it somewhere you will see it regularly. Action 3. Commit to your one daily financial habit. Decide right now on the specific 60-second daily practice that will keep you engaged with your financial life. When you'll do it, what you'll look at, and where you'll track your progress. Then do it tomorrow morning. Not next week. Tomorrow. The habit that begins tomorrow is the one that exists. The habit planned for later is the one that usually doesn't. One last thing. You now have 10 chapters and 30 action steps. Everything you need to build genuine financial freedom is already in your hands. But knowing and doing are 2 different things. So we built you a journal. A complete, structured guide designed to take everything you just heard and turn it into real action. Your freedom number, your debt map, your money story, your 12-month sprint, all in one place. Not a summary. A transformation guide you work through at your own pace, in your own handwriting, on your own terms. The link is in the description. Financial freedom is closer than you think. The journal is how you prove it.